Hello guys, welcome back to this channel. In this video, we will look at how to convert an anonymous object to a user-defined class. Let's get started. So here we have, I want to consume an API. I'll just mimic consuming an API. Controller, and let's call that API. I've written that class before, and let's instantiate this new controller class, which returns JSON string like all APIs will do. So let's see what we have inside API. API.get all employees. So we'll be getting JSON string that will return a custom return model. Since we are getting string back, let's put that in a string variable and call that response, which is equal to get all employees like that. So here we have the response from this, and what do we want to do? We want the API custom model, which we have in the JSON string. We want to collect that. So you see how we do that. The return model, we can call that results. I call that results, and we use JSON convert. JSON convert is a class in the native soft library, which I've included using NuGet package manager. You can say this native soft JSON, and there's a method there, deserialized object. So this deserialized object, we pass the JSON string into it, which is the response, so that we can have a return model. Yes, so here we need to tell native of JSON which class we are passing our JSON string into. It is basically what we're going to be doing throughout today. So we're passing that into return model, and you can see that the error is now gone. So if you look at what we have in the return model, let's check the quick definition. So in return model, we have status, message, and return object. And if you look at the type of return object, it is object which is found in system.object class. So it is a base object on which all C# objects are inherit. So there are APIs application that return this kind of model. So whatever or whichever endpoint you call, they will always return this model. So but in a return object, well, as that has this object type, anything can be returned in it. I will see that in a bit. Now we need to collect the employees list, and which we have in the return object. That's what we want to do now. So how we can do that is, let's declare a string variable, and let's call that employees string. You see why I named that in a bit. So what we need to do here is we want to get what we have in the results. Okay, so let me quickly show you why we are really doing this. So if you go, let me go down and show you. We have employee class, an employee class here that's defined with the properties that will store all what will be coming for each object from the API. So since our API is getting all employee, we should just have declared a list of employee, and call that employees, and then since we have a return object, we could just pass results dot return object, because we know that the list of employee is inside the return object. But as you can see, we have an error. And what's the error? It says cannot implicitly convert type object to a generic list of an employee. And of course, that makes sense because you cannot convert an object which is the base class of all C# classes to a defined type, because in C# you can safely cast a derived object, for example employee, to a base object class which is the object. So but you cannot you cannot cast an object which is a derived object or class into a base class, but you can safely, store a derived class in a base class. So if you look at the error, it says, are you missing a cast? So some people will just ask me, why can't we then cast the return object into list of employee like so. So if you look at this, you notice that we no longer have an error, but C# Microsoft calls this an unsafe casting, because in the compile time there won't be any error because the engine cannot detect it. But when you run it, you notice that it will throw an error. Let's quickly run it and see what we have here. Yes, and we have an error. It says unable to cast object of this type to an employee. So, and the reason is what I've explained, that you cannot in C# cast a base class into a derived class. So if you have a class that inherits from another class, you cannot cast that child class to its base class, but you can safely cast a derived class into its base class, but you cannot cast a base class into its derived class, if you get what I mean. So that's why we can't do this. So what then do we do? So what we can do is, since we are aware of what we have inside return object, which is basically the list of employee, so we can also make use of Newton Soft library from JSON convert. So this is what we're doing now. We're converting the object coming, that object coming from the API, we're converting it to JSON by using JSON convert serialize, and we pass our object into it, and that object we have it in result dot return object. This is what we have, object here. So when we do that, don't forget this will return a string, so we need to pass this into a string variable. Let's call that variable employee string. So like so, if you do that, the error should go. Now the error has gone. So now we have in employee string a JSON string essentially, which we cannot convert, also still using JSON Newton Soft JSON library, very useful, into our desired class, like I'll show you in a bit. So now can safely declare a list of employee, and we have it as employees. What do we do then? We can then, like I said before, use our JSON convert, and then what do? We pass the JSON string of employees, list of employees, which we have converted to JSON string here, we pass it directly into this. But don't forget that we now need to specify that we are converting it. In other words, we are changing it from JSON string to a list of employees so it can map it correctly. And when I've done that, the error should disappear. So here we have a list of employees. Let's quickly run this code. When we run this code, I have a breakpoint here. When we run this code, yeah, then we'll go through it for you to have what I'm talking about very well. So yes, it hits a breakpoint without error. And now let's go up from the API. And now I want you to look at what we have in response. The response here, based on what I've written here, which not much of is not within the scope of this tutorial. So what we are concerned about is this get all employee return a JSON string just like all APIs will do. And then what have we been able to do? We've been able to deserialize. In other words, change that JSON string to this return model class. And if you inspect that return model class, you will notice that we have a class which contains message which is successful, status which is true, and we have return object which is an object essentially. If you look at it, you see user ID which is the key in code, and then you see that the ID is 1 which is an integer. And if you notice that we have an object that has a name because it was given a name, but the type is not specific. The type is not specific. At least our own code is not aware of the type of what is coming within that return object. It's just basically an object. So now when we look at the next step, you notice, just like I've said, that for us to be able to pass this anonymous object to our list of employee class, we can then take that return object, which is an anonymous object with its value. We can convert that to a JSON string like you can see here. And what we do next is we just from the JSON string here, we can then deserialize it again, and you can see now that we have 3 counts of employee class. That's a list, and here we have access to any of the properties of any of the employees we want to use, and we can use that any way we like to use it. Now there is a second option for what we are doing. There's a second option, there's a second method we can use. So let's come here, let's start from here. So let's just rename this to employees 1, and let's see what other way can we do this if we don't want to use JSON JSON serialize from here. If we don't want to serialize it, what else can we do? So let's quickly see that. We can also get a list of employees like we are doing right now. We can get a list of employees like we are doing right now, and let's name these employees 2, just so to differentiate them. And then we say this is equal to JSON. Sorry, we are not using So JSON convert, and we deserialize. Don't forget, we deserialize to a list of employee. So what's the difference? So here, instead of passing in an already converted JSON string, what we can do is to get the result, and in the result we have the return object, and we can call the toString extension method. Extension method. When we call toString extension method on this return object, what happens is this toString actually converted to a JSON string, because, and you have to take note of this, it could only do that because the program class where we within our own code, our own class, which is the program class, is not aware of the namespace of this return object. And if it's aware of the namespace, you will not be able, if you cut to string on it, it will return the qualified name of that object type and it will not convert it to JSON. So can we see if this works just like we have seen the other one? We can quickly see that. So as we run this, and now we have it on breakpoint. So if you point to this, you notice that we still have that object. It to string method will convert it to JSON, and we cannot deserialize that JSON into objects like so. And if you look at it, we have exactly the same result. So what if we don't have, we are not looking at a list of objects? Yes, so even if it is not a list of objects, the same applies. So for example, in my API, I have another method that calls an employee with by ID. So let's say one response, just let's accept it. Now we'll call it from API, and there's a method there which is get one employee, and then it's expecting an ID. So let me pass an ID, maybe 2, like I've created it there before. So now I have this one response. So what can I do? Just like I told you, whatever endpoint you call in that API application, it will always return a custom return model, and that's what we have here. So this code is just fine for us. Now what we do is yes, so we can, like we have a single object now this time around of an employee within our return object, and that return object we are changing it again to a JSON string, and it will be stored there. This is also still fine for us now. But at this point, because we are getting a single employee, so what will be the type we define will be that of a single employee. And if you look at it, what we do is to now just accept a single employee and not a list of employee anymore. Then we do that, the error should go. Yes, now the error has gone. So we do away with this. We do away with this. Okay, well, let me give you the second option. Yeah, but don't forget we are actually going to be passing this to a single employee. So we just remove a list of employee from our line of code. So now we're expecting a single employee. Just like before, we can call to string extension method on this, and then it changes it to JSON and deserialize it into this. So quickly, let's run the code and let's see if it works for us. Yeah. Whoa, we have an error there. Okay, so let's see what happens. It says JSON object naming value. Okay, so let's fix that quickly. So yeah, here we expect, so that you can understand what I'm saying. Yeah. Oh yeah, so I know where the issue is now. So we are trying to convert a list of employee which is in response to a single employee object. We should have used our one response instead of that. So that code was not so fine after all. So if you have changed that, we should not have that error anymore. So quickly we go through it. Yeah, now we hit a breakpoint, and that's without error. So quickly we can check what we have here. We still have perfect JSON string like we will have anytime we consume an API. Then when you check your response, notice that we have the same return object just like we did when we were getting a list of employees, and then changing that object to a JSON string just as perfectly as we have seen it, or I will now notice that in our employee object we have a perfect object that belongs to the employee whose ID we put in, and this works also when you call to string on this object. So I think with this you should be able to handle anyone, even if you have, just like we have in use case time, because I want to keep this video short. Anytime where you get a return, or you get to a response from an API or an included library that returns an object, the base object type, you can use JSON